Hello, my history friends. These are the notes for 27.1 and 27.2. So go ahead and get your notes out and go ahead and open up to this first page. You can pause me at any time and come back. All right, we've got our first slide. This is kind of an introduction and background because now that World War II is over, our economy is going to have to shift. Because during World War II, our federal government was focusing all of the supplies on helping win that war. So everything we were doing in our factories was related to the war. And so now we have all these soldiers coming home and we have some big questions to answer. And economic questions that also need to be answered. So when we talk about the economy, one of the biggest things we were worried about is what are we going to do with the 12 million soldiers who are returning home? 12 million young men who had gone to fight are now going to come home, and they need a job because their job was being a soldier, and now that's done. So the government is going to pass something called the Full Employment Act, and this is the first time our government is taking responsibility for getting people back to work. And we're going to see a small dip in our economy, and then it's going to soar. So it only declines for a very short amount of time, and then it's going to climb, and improve because people that come home from war are ready to live their best lives again, just like after World War I. They want to buy new cars, they want to buy houses, they want to put all new things inside those houses. So we're going to see our economy growing quite a bit. The government will pass something called the GI Bill. GI stands for General Infantry. You may have heard of that before when we talk about G.I. Joe, like that little toy from when we were little. But this law is going to be set up to help the General Infantry, the GI, or the soldiers who've come home from war. So it gives them money to go to college, to get a job. And so we're going to see more white-collar Americans as opposed to blue-collar Americans. So white-collar refers to people who would work in an office and need a white-collar dress shirt, as opposed to people who might be working more with their hands in maybe like a mechanic situation where they would be wearing a blue-collared shirt. So this bill is still around today, the GI Bill. So lots of times people after they're done in the military can go on to college. But so now that we see these men getting jobs in more of a like business type setting where they have to have their college degree for that, they're going to be making a little more money than they had ever made before. And so they're going to buy these houses that are called prefab houses, prefabricated. There's a picture of one there in your notes. And they're pretty small, but they are they're perfect size for a new family, which is what we're going to see happening after World War II. This is going to be known as the baby boom. And so all of these soldiers come home and they are ready to get started with their lives and get on with it. And so they've bought these houses. Now they want to have kids inside these houses. So we're going to see more kids being born during this time period than any other time period before. It's known as the baby boom. And so you may have heard that term boomer before. And in today's terminology, right, we're referring to that as more of like an older person, and that would make sense because like my dad is a baby boomer. He was born in 1954, and so he was born after World War II. And this is going to increase the number of jobs in America because more babies in our country means we need more hospitals for those babies, so we have to build them. We're going to need more schools for all these kids, so we have to build them. We're going to need nurses and doctors and teachers and everyone to fill up these buildings. So more jobs. This is going to turn America into one of the strongest nations in the world. We will have the strongest economy from 1946 to 1960, and the majority of the Americans are going to fall inside that middle class. After the war, many of our farmers will return home and head back to farming. But we're going to see that there's new technology that's coming about. So we'll have new seeds being planted that are going to be helpful because they will be able to fight off disease. We're going to see tractors being used for the first time, and that's going to help everything go a little bit faster. They're going to be using combines, which is the larger tractor that cuts down the crop at the end of the season. And then we have implements, which are the things you pull behind, so like a planter or a disc. So you have those behind the tractors, and also irrigation systems to water. And all of these things are going to help our farmers in America become the best farmers in the world. Our farmers after World War II were the most productive of anywhere in the world. And we're going to be sharing a lot of our goods with European countries. All right, so make sure you have everything done for 27.1 because we're going to get ready to move on to 27.2. So in 27.1, we talked all about our economy, how it dipped just a little because we were worried about the soldiers coming home and needing jobs. But we'll see that because many of them are going to go off to college with the GI Bill, that they will make a little bit more money. So here's some background information for 27.2. It's called Searching for Peace. It says Americans were happy that World War II had ended. Thousands celebrated in the streets of the nation's cities as their friends and loved ones returned home from war. They waved flags, they honked horns, they cheered, and they cried. And so in America, we're celebrating because we were victorious. We had won. But my friends, you have to look at these images and remember that there are very war-torn parts of the world that are going to need our help. The death and the destruction of World War II was the absolute worst in history. Over 55 million people had died, and over $1 trillion was spent. In America alone, we lost 400,000 military men and women, and we spent $360 billion on this war. And so we have some big questions that we have to answer, one of them being, how do we rebuild this area? Well, America is going to become a superpower, and so people are going to look to us for help. After we got involved in World War I and II, both of those wars will come to an end. America was responsible for helping win those, and so we are going to be looked at for help in almost all cases moving forward. And we're never going to be able to isolate ourselves again from world problems because other countries know that we have the ability to help. After dropping the bombs in Japan, the rest of the world knows that we have that technology. It's not a secret anymore. And so other countries are going to try and catch up and try and also get those bombs and make them, which is going to kind of open up that idea that we talked about last week in our bell ringer and in our discussion about the atomic bomb. Just, if we have them, why aren't we using them? Oh, because we know how destructive they are and how dangerous this is. And so even though we have this new weapon and other countries are starting to develop it, we really want to keep the peace. And so in order to keep that peace, an organization is going to be formed, and it's going to be known as the United Nations. 50 nations will meet in San Francisco in April of 1945, and they're going to be creating the United Nations. We still have the United Nations today. And the goal there is to create peace, and it sometimes involves using force. So it's trying to keep peace and avoid us from another world war. And they want to do a better job than the League of Nations. The League of Nations was developed after World War I, but it failed. And we know it failed because Hitler was allowed to come into power, and Germany was never supposed to have an army or the weapons that they had. So they're going to create something called the Security Council, and they're going to, around the world, we're going to be trying to keep that peace. And so involved in the Security Council is us, Great Britain, France, Soviet Union, China, and they're going to make a statement on genocide and say that it is unlawful and that anywhere in the world where genocide is trying to take place, the United Nations will step in. And so what happened during the Holocaust was genocide. Hitler was attempting to do away with all Jewish people with that final solution. And so we're going to see that the United Nations is going to be an organization that wants to step in and stop that from ever happening again. And so here's just a chart of the United Nations and who's involved. But that first task is going to come in 1949. This is going to be a very, very big and important part from right now until even present day. So in our notes in 1949 all the way up until 2024. So after World War II, because of what happened to the Jewish people, the United Nations wants to create a piece of land for the Jews to go to as a bit of a holy land. And so they are going to create the country of Israel. They're going to take land from what used to be Palestine, and they're going to create Israel. And it's for the Jewish people. But my friends, this is located in the Middle East. And so many Arab nations are angry about this, and they say that that land belongs to them, that the land of Israel is their holy land, and that it should not belong to the Jewish people. And so the United Nations is going to have to step in and stop the fighting and bring back peace. Now, I need you to hear me loud and clear on this. Israel is still around today, but this is what we're looking at in the notes is from 1949. And so starting back in 1949, countries of the Middle East are going to be angry at the United States and other countries that are involved in the United Nations because of this decision. They're very angry because they feel that that land should belong to them. It is still why there are conflicts surrounding Israel today. Truman is going to be forced into that role of president. We talked about him in the last unit. He's the president who was responsible for dropping the atomic bomb. He'd really only been president for 3 months when he was forced into that role of president and when he had to decide to drop the atomic bombs. He wants to run for re-election in 1948. There's one of his pins there. And he says, I'm going to create a fair deal. He's a Democrat. So much like FDR's New Deal, because FDR was also a Democrat, He wants to expand social programs that are going to help people. So let's include more people in Social Security, let's spend more money on science and education, and let's get some public housing in the cities, especially for those people after World War II. All right, there's going to be something called the Taft-Hartley Act. Many Republicans are against Truman's Fair Deal because they feel that the government will become too big. They don't like the idea of labor unions. And so Congress will pass something called the Taft-Hartley Act, and it's going to allow employers to hire non-union workers. And the unions, of course, are going to be against this, and we're going to see that that's going to lead to some conflict in our country. But in 1948, when it's time for that election, Truman will go against Thomas E. Dewey. He was part of the he was a Republican, but the Democrats were split over civil rights. President Truman did support civil rights. He was in favor of supporting African Americans and their rights, especially in the South. And so he will win re-election because the unions are supporting him, and so are the African Americans. So he's going to get the vast majority of votes, and he is going to win. All right, my friends, we're going to stop there with our notes for today, and you need to do the questions for 27.1 and 27.2.